You ever walk into a room and forget why you're there, so you start meandering and hoping that it'll come to you before eventually just starting another task that's already in front of you because it's easier? Yeah, that's the Predator movies. Let me get out in front of this and say that I've only ever seen the original and the one I'm reviewing today, and my knowledge of the other ones is spotty. But I'm an internet critic. It's not my job to be informed, it's my job to tear apart in 5 minutes what took hundreds of people years or more to make. I think in this rare instance, ignorance actually serves in my favor, because instead of being the boiling frog, I can see the stark contrast between the two plain as day. And let me tell you, there is a lot of contrast. How on earth are both of these movies part of the same IP? Look, this review is going to be spoiler heavy just by virtue of the fact that there's not a lot to tell. But if you don't want a rough map of how the film goes, then skip ahead by a few minutes or turn back now. But trust when I say you are not missing much. The film starts on planet Predator, which I think is called Yautja Prime or something. Oh yeah, the Predators are called Yautja now, and you're meant to feel sympathy for them. That's right, who needs menace and mystery when you have a script that needs a home and a franchise to exploit? Anyhizzle, the main character, a Yautja teenager named Deck, wants to prove himself to his spiteful, judgy father by going on a solo hunt to earn his place in the clan. Pops ain't having it, though, and orders Deck's more affectionate older brother to kill him. Deck's big bro pulls the old shove and walk a loved one into a spaceship and set autopilot course trick and sends him away from the planet. For his troubles, the brother is killed by their dad just in time for Deck to see it as the ship takes off. Eventually, Deck crash lands on the planet of Genna, which is basically Space Australia. His only goal is to find and kill a MacGuffin known as the Kalisk to avenge his brother's death. Already the cracks start to show. Grand total of 3 things happen in the next hour of this film. First, Deck meets a talkative android with all the personality of a table called Thea and a monkey, lizard, armadillo thing that the android dubs Bud. Second, he reluctantly agrees to let them tag along on his quest because they can be useful to him. But I guess he eventually comes to care for them even though Thea clearly has ulterior motives, and I don't even know what Bud was there for except maybe to act as an alien ex machina a couple times. Third, Deck does find the Kalisk, gets his butt kicked, and realizes that it can heal from literally anything, including decapitation. Okay. This movie is giving me a headache, so I'm just gonna ignore the horrendous logic of that one for now. In the last act, Thea, Deck, and the Kalisk are captured by Thea's robot friends, and we find out that all along she also wanted to capture it for, that's right, you guessed it, the Weyland-Yutani Corporation. I know they tried to merge the Predator and Alien franchises a few years ago, but good grief, what have we come to? Whatever. Thea apparently has experienced a change of heart, so she helps Deck escape and is put into robo-prison while the crew readies to head back to Earth. Deck and Bud, who is a baby Kalisk if you didn't notice that from the first time you saw the mom, stage a daring rescue of Thea, blow up the android base, watch the Kalisk get blasted into oblivion, and decide to be a trio going forward. Deck goes home to whoop his father, which he can do now, and then his mom shows up. Roll credits.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard.
Hey, no need to tell me how laughably bad this movie is. I mean, I can't even toss it the usual bone of it looks good because no, it doesn't. Look at the creatures from the 1987 original and a film made 40 years later side by side and tell me with a straight face that this is an upgrade. Then there are the internal discrepancies, like why can the Kalisk heal from decapitation but not freeze damage? Why do Thea's disembodied legs work on their own only some of the time? How does Bud have skin tough enough to break a monster's teeth when Deck's sword easily slices through the adult? If Thea's translation software lets everybody hear their own language, why don't the writers let Deck speak in English and make it clear to us that he's still speaking Yautja for easier understanding? What does the fox say? Not to mention the nonsensical plot. Why did Bud want to save Deck and Thea when all they had done up to that point was compete with her for food? Why exactly is Deck still bent on getting the Kalisk instead of training to fight his dad? For that fact, why does he need to train at all? He's supposed to be a weakling, but he loses 2 fights in the entire movie, and most of it is him winning them. I suppose you could argue that he's weak by Yautja standards, but if that's the case, I don't get why he'd magically be able to defeat his father after no additional training. And no, fighting a regenerative space monkey and a gaggle of androids does not count as training. Don't even get me started on the cast. Deck's brother loves him enough to sacrifice his life, which is great, but doesn't make any sense given Yautja society. Thea is meant to be the quirky one, except she has no quirks and is only there to spew information and set up dialogue. I seriously do not get the inclusion of Bud except to save Deck from getting killed by the adult Kalisk later in the film. The only credit I can vaguely gesture to with this mess is that the writers did try to give Deck an arc, but it was rushed and unearned and a net negative. Part of the reason this story flops is that the characters feel totally disconnected from one another thematically speaking. Deck has to learn that alone is no way to live, and since he's the main character, the rest of the subplots should center around that, yeah? And yet, Thea spends much of her screen time contemplating emotions and what it means to be alive/feel love. Where do those lines meet? All of this before considering that it's supposed to exist in the same continuity as Predator. Remember when I said I could see the differences between Badlands and the one that started it all because I haven't been bogged down by the middle steps? Buckle up. Maybe the worst of all modern writing practices is the evident addiction of taking a character that has been widely understood as fundamentally in the wrong and trying to make them a point of sympathy. Evil is evil. In Predator, we see plainly that the only point of the creature being on Earth is to kill intelligent life for sport. That is evil. Plain, simple evil, and we all know it. So how are we expected to view it as some important cultural practice just because there's more of them in one spot and we're seeing it through their eyes? But expert you yapper about Yautjas, you missed the point. Deck moves away from that line of thought. Well, sorta. He spares the Kalisk because he's friends with Bud and demonstrates his supposed commitment to killing not being a way of life by killing his father. Beyond that, I see absolutely no evidence to support the claim that Deck has changed in this way. Maybe it was in a deleted scene, or perhaps the writers, with their limited capabilities, did try to convey it. But it was a bust. I don't know, it might be a failing on my part, but I just wasn't sold. At least we still have the original, right? Funny you should mention it, because now we have to talk about how Badlands ties in. There's a wacky term the world has become obsessed with called moral relativism. It means that good and evil are different things to different people, so you can't impose your morals on someone else. Look, we can talk all day about if/when it's okay to break the law, but if you try to sacrifice a dog to the Great Twinkie at my local Walmart just because it's a family tradition, I'm calling the cops. Apply the same logic to the Predator franchise, and I'm sure you can see where it breaks down. Oh, their society isn't evil because it's built on murder, it's just a different way of life. In 1987, the Predator was, correctly, depicted as evil. If you're dead set on presenting a skewed morality in your world, make it consistent. What you now have is a set of movies trying to offer at least two distinct moralities that cannot coexist, and your only option is to try and ignore one or the other altogether. Audiences are asked to accept two realities, one where the predators are the bad guys, and one where they're just beyond our comprehension. Really, Badlands is just the newest shot fired in a franchise at war with itself, and audiences got caught in the crossfire. Here's the thing that eludes Hollywood. Strip away the costumes, set pieces, and legacy actors, and some of the flops from recent years have the core of a good movie. Predator Badlands is a disaster all on its own, and nothing short of a full-scale rewrite could undo the damage inflicted by the script. It's just made worse by pretending to be a continuation of Predator. There are, however, plenty of movies that would be decent under their own identities. It's only the insistence on shoehorning the story a writer wants to tell into an existing creation that's holding them back. New additions to an IP's catalog might clash with established canon, putting heavy constraints on what you can do or forcing you to chuck out the lore entirely. Who wants that? I know, flying your work under your own flag is a big, scary thing. Get a grip, though. The world is a big, scary place, the entertainment industry is not for the weak-willed, and life goeth on. There is nothing new under the sun, and we are all standing on the shoulders of those who came before. This tactic, however, is more like standing directly on the throat. And I don't get the appeal. Not only are writers tanking movies they probably loved growing up, but they're sabotaging their own careers and depriving the world of what could have been perfectly original stories if they'd just bothered to come up with a world of their own. But no. Piracy is easy, and it's even easier to wipe your tears with a studio check. Point of all this being, I still want one of those Yautja swords.